Hey everybody. Welcome to the second to last episode in this series of the Soma guitar build. We're going to work on the finish today, and as usual, we're going to do something a little bit different. So we're going to start off with a lot of sanding, and I'm not going to get into too much detail over that. It's just rubbing paper on wood until it's smooth. But hang in there, because this is going to get, I think, a little bit interesting. So I'll be the first to admit that finishing is not my forte. I'm not really set up for it in such a small shop. I don't have a spray room. And there are other considerations, like the fact that I live near a lake and, I don't want to kind of sort of use things that are overly toxic. So with that in mind and the theme of this guitar, we're going to be using two really unusual techniques here for the finish. And one of them is going to be the use of methylene blue, which is a very interesting chemical that we'll get into when we get to that part. And the other part is going to be ebonizing the wood and then sanding that back. So instead of staining it a dark color as a primary base, it's going to be done with actual, well, I'll explain that when we get to it. So we're going to be using a brushed on Crystalac finish for the body, and then we're going to use an oil for the neck. I love that combination. Here I am putting it on the back, and this is simply to protect the exposed wood while I work on the top. This will all be sanded off later. But it does give you a nice preview of what it's going to look like when it's got the final finish coats on it. So as I was getting ready to start the staining process, I kind of sort of realized that this little area has always bothered me as far as the transition between these two curves go, and I thought of a way of resolving that, and I took a moment to kind of sort of go back in there and recarve this a little bit. And it's a very subtle difference, but I think it came out a lot better. And as usual, the best solutions are sometimes the simplest, and this just involves scraping back a little bit farther until both lines have met. So taking one last look at the figure in this wood, I've always found this kind of sort of thing to remind me of those holographic stickers back in the day. If you're a boomer or a Gen Xer, you know what I'm talking about. But I think in this particular wood, from the moment I saw it, it reminded me of being underwater, which is part of what inspired the color choices that I made. And here the fun begins. What I'm going to be making for the ebonizing agent, and I'm sure some of you already know this, it's a very popular trick. But basically you take some steel wool, as fine as you can find, you get some vinegar, and you get a little bit of water, and you put them all in a jar. And what's going to end up happening is the vinegar is going to eat away and rust the actual steel wool, and it'll dissolve within 24 to 48 hours. Now, I've done this before on other projects and other pieces of wood, and I'm really kind of sort of interested in how it looks, because it's not a stain. It's not something that feels like it's sitting on top of the wood. It actually just changes the wood color itself. And it does so by basically interacting with the tannins that exist on the surface of the wood or in the grains of the wood. And it causes a chemical reaction that makes them go dark. And once it's dissolved, as you saw there, you basically just brush it on. And you can use several coats to make it really dark, or you can just go as light as you want. You'll see how this chemical reaction takes shape. And this is what I was going for. As you can see, it really just looks like the wood itself. It's not a stain. And I wanted it to kind of sort of leave the light parts really light and the dark parts very dark. And it really kind of sort of, I mean, I could have put a finish on this and been just as happy leaving it this way. So this is the first coat of color, and it's a very deep navy blue. And most of this is going to be sanded back. I just wanted to give that kind of sort of deep, dark color to the grain. Unfortunately, though, I didn't take any pictures of what it looked like after I had sanded it back, but you can see it in this next shot. And here we have the star of the show, methylene blue. It's a really interesting chemical. It was invented for textile coloring, and it turned out to have very interesting medical properties, which is how I ran into it. One of them is to act as a transport of oxygen from blood into the cells, and so it's used in carbon monoxide poisoning, and that's where I first encountered it. I remember the first time I saw it thinking, what a beautiful shade of blue. And I've always wanted to use it for something, and, well, this guitar kind of sort of gave me the opportunity, and it seemed to match the theme, so I'm glad I did. Its usefulness goes beyond just carbon monoxide poisoning. The way it works is it basically helps transport oxygen into the mitochondria, which are basically little energy factories inside every last one of your cells. And this turns out to have a lot of interesting benefits. It raises blood pressure, it helps stop bleeding, and one of its most interesting properties is that it's claimed to be a nootropic, which is any substance that improves the function of the brain. Oddly enough, though, it's also extremely safe. Now, I'm not advocating anybody try this stuff. I would never try anything that I don't have a prescription from a doctor for, not me. So this is not medical advice. So I know I'm biased, but I think that's a really beautiful shade of blue. And I would be perfectly happy leaving it just like that. But unfortunately, the wood needs some protection. So what I'm going to use is the Crystalac, and I'm going to brush it on. I think you have better results with this stuff if you spray it. But I've used it a few times, and I think I'm starting to get the hang of it. The secret is just very, very thin coats. And so at the end, you don't have to sand too much orange peel or brush strokes out of the finish. So off camera, after I was done with this first coat, I did about, I would say, 4 coats over the next maybe 2 or 3 days. And so here you can see what she's going to look like. And at this point, I was really excited. It was coming out exactly as I had envisioned it. And, well, you know something's going to go wrong. So after letting it cure for a few days, I walked in and I saw this. Somehow I had left the methylene blue sitting at the corner of my work table, and the guitar was actually, you can't see it in this picture, but hanging behind where this was, and I just knew what I was going to find, and, well, it splattered on the surface of the guitar. Now, it wasn't a major thing. You had to look really close, but you can see them here in the pictures. What made this worse is that the methylene blue reacted with the finish. It wasn't just on the surface. It had colored the finish itself. So there was no way of really sanding these little spots or covering these spots up. So I basically had to sand all this back to the bare wood. And I'm going to spare you that entire process. Just watch the video again because I had to repeat everything all over again. And it came out fine. And I actually got to get the color a little bit darker, which is what I wanted. So anyway, the next episode will be the last one in this series. I want to thank you guys for watching. If you want to see how she turns out, like and subscribe, and peace out.